All right, so we'll start over here on Chesed Aleph, and we're right in the middle of a discussion of the Gemara before, in which the Gemara used the pasuk of mi zoivoi. The Gemara before used the pasuk that a korban is not brought for all zovs. There is a zov that saw twice, 2 consecutive days. There is a zov that saw 3 times, either 3 consecutive days or 2 in one day and 1 on the other day. And the Gemara used the word mi zoivoi to tell us that not every zov, some zov bring a korban and some don't. Mizoivei, Rashi said, mashma mikza zoivei. Okay. So now let's continue the Gemara. V'hashto de amrit mizoivei lidrosha. So now you are saying that mizoivei comes for a drasha. This mizoivei that we use for a drasha is actually in pasuk tezvav. I want to show you the pasuk inside, and this is the pasuk. I'm going to show you the pasuk in the note over here. Is the pasuk. So just listen to me. This is the pasuk. So this is in Vayikra chapter tezvav. And this is Pasuk Yud Gimel through Tezvav, okay? 13 through 15. This is what the Pasuk says there. V'chiyitar hazov mizoivai. When the zov becomes clean, again, it says here the word mizoivai. Remember this Pasuk, the Gemara is going to ask about this mizoivai. When the zov will be cleaned from the zoivai, technically you can just say v'chiyitar hazov, when the zov becomes clean. You don't need the pasuk mizoivei, right? So when the zav becomes clean, but the Torah says chitar of mizoivei. So what happens once he becomes clean? Comes clean means he no longer sees any flow. So he must count for himself 7 days till he can become clean. There's a certain status. The pasuk said while he's a zav, if he sits on a bed or on a chair, everything becomes tamei. It becomes actually an avatuma, as we said. What happens after he becomes clean? He has to count 7 days to become clean. And then v'chibes begodov, and then he washes his clothes. It means goes to the mikvah. He has to immerse his clothes in the mikvah. And also v'rochatz b'sorei b'mayim chayim v'toyer. And then he has to wash his flesh in living water. That's a mikvah water. And then v'toyer, then he becomes clean. What happens with Bayom Hashmini on the 8th day? So 7 days he counted, and then he goes to the mikvah. And on the 8th day, Yikach leishtei tzodim, he take 2 doves, or 2 pigeons, and then he comes before Hashem, a Pesach oil moyed, and he gives it to the kohen. So the kohen makes him echot chatas. One of these birds is a chatas. Echot oila, one is a oila. V'chiper olav hakohen lifnei Hashem. And the kohen will atone for him before Hashem. The Torah again writes the word mizoivoi. An extra word mizoivoi. What do we need this? Should say v'chiper olav hakohen lifnei Hashem atone. What does it mean mizoivoi? This is the pasuk that the Gemara used, mizoivoi, to tell you that this korban. Here we're talking about a korban. We're talking about a korban. So this korban is only mizoivoi, some zov. If you are a zov that saw 3 times, then you bring a korban. But if you're a zov that saw 2 times, you don't bring a korban. So that's why it says mi zoive, which means some do and some don't. So the Gemara is asking now, since you are giving me a drasha for this pasuk mizoive, which says in the end of the pasuk, you use that drasha to tell us that only some zov bring a korban and not all zov, because it says mi zoivoi. So what about in the beginning when it says v'chiyitar hazov mi zoivoi? It also says mi zoivoi there. What are you going to darshan? What's your drasha for that pasuk? That's the Gemara's question now. Okay, and we'll get back to this psukim over here to help us understand the Gemara. So frag the Gemara. Now that you're saying that the mizoivoi is ledrasha, is coming to tell us a drasha. What's the drasha that is telling us?
That some bring a carbon and some don't.
Some bring a carbon, some don't bring a carbon. So the Gemara brings down the pasuk of Tezvav Yud Gimel. That's the first pasuk. The last pasuk is Tezvav. The first pasuk is pasuk Yud Gimel. So it says in the pasuk v'chiyitar hazov mizoivoi. The pasuk here also says the word mizoivoi. Question is, my darshas way. What are you going to expound it? Because it's an extra mizoivoi. Because before you darshan the mizoivoi, what are you going to do this mizoivoi to? Is it clear? Yeah. Okay. Zog the Gemara. Well, I have a drasha for there too. That I need for something which we learned in a Brisa. The Brisa talks about a halacha. So, what happens? What happens if a person is a zav? Like we just went through the pasuk. So once the ziva stops, count 7 days, and you go to the mikveh. And on the 8th day, if you're a 3 times zov, then you bring a korban. If 2 times zov, you don't bring a korban. Okay. What happens? Unfortunately, this guy who's a zov also develops a leprosy. So now he has a nega on top of it.
Poor guy.
So he has leprosy and he's a zav. So he finishes his ziva, but he's still a nega. Can he start counting his 7 days? What's going to be the process of a nega? The process of a nega is that first, after the becomes clear, he goes to the mikveh, then he has to wait another 7 days. And then he goes a second time to the mikveh. So now the issue is a zav has certain stringency, like we learned before, that he sits, it's called mishka v'moisav. He makes everything tama even though he doesn't reach it. And so we're saying that what happens after he finished his ziva and he counted, so even though he still has a nega, so the moment the nega is clean, he goes to the mikveh and he no longer, even though he can't eat kosher because he still has a nega, but he already gets cleaned from the more stringent tuma that he has as one who's a zav. A zav is more tameh, is more metame than the person that has tsaras, because a zav is metame with mishka v'moishav, and one has tsaras is not metame mishka v'moishav. So we're saying that even while you are a Metzora, you have a nega, but once you're clean from your zoiv, you can start counting. And then, even though you're still tummy now, because you're tummy from a nega, you can start counting as soon as the zav is over. And then, when you can go the first time in the mikveh because of the nega, you will lose your serious status of zav. Let's look inside. Oh, and the Rashi. Who by look at the time? The pasuk says, "V'chiyitar hazav," and the pasuk says, "Mizoyvoy," because all what we're interested is like sheyifsoik mizoyvoy, that he has to when he stops the zav. Chiyitar hazav mizoyvoy. The pasuk is trying to tell you, all what he has to do is stop the ziva. He should no longer have the flow. But you don't have to wait to also not be a nega no longer. You don't have to wait for that. You can start counting as soon as the zav is over. What is that going to help you? Because as soon as you're going to be able to go to the mikveh because of the nega, you no longer have the serious tumah of a zav. Let's look at Rashi. He says when he stops his zoyve, so he's saying, "Ein tzorich lidbol koidem sfira, elo misheyivsek yimna." You don't have to immerse yourself before the counting. Rashi explained like this. This is the girsa in Teres Karna. Mizoivai, the loy mizoiva menigay, as we have in the Gemara. Rashi explains. She'im hayazov umetzoida. If he was both, he was a zav and also metzoida. Upasak mizoivai, he stopped the flow. Beloy nisrape adayin menigay. And he hasn't yet healed from the leprosy. The nega is still there. But he's no longer a zav, but he still has a leprosy. And then v'safar. So he counts. Who counts? The zav, because the zav has to count 7 days before, clean days, before he can go to the mikvah. So after he stopped seeing the zav, and he's a nega, he still has that, and he counts 7 days. In Emrim Loi, we're not going to tell him, Ein Sfira Zunikiyas. These are not called clean counting. We don't say that. You must be also clean, that you no longer have a nega. So you're counting now. After Yeziva isn't enough. We don't say that. He goes on and he counts immediately. And that counts for the counting of the zoif. What happens? And when he heals from his leprosy, so over there he has to do 2 tevilah. As soon as he heals, yitbel miyad tevilah rishono shel mitzora. You go the first tevilah for the mitzora, v'hi oilaloi litvilas nigoy b'zoyva. That counts for him both for the first immersion for the nega and also for the zoyva, because he already counted 7 days. What does it help him that he's tahir? What does this immersion help him? He's still a Talmudic person because he has a nega. What does that help him? But at least v'nithar militame mishka v'moshe. At least he's clean that he will no longer be metame the place that he lies or he sits on, which even the thing that he doesn't touch, all of them become tummy. And also, what is the help of the zav, of the mitzora, his first immersion helps him. Uletame klei cheres behesed kedin zav. Azav, even if he doesn't touch, but if it's like on a seesaw, or he raises a klei cheres, even though he doesn't touch it, so he's metame, he would be metame a zav. But after the first immersion, he is no longer metame mishkav v'moshe of this individual, and he will no longer be metame klei cheres behesed because he went to the mikvah. It helped him from the nega, and it helped him for mishkav v'moshe. Well, that wouldn't be yet the final procedure for this person. He would still need to count 7 as far as eating kochim. He can't eat kochim, he's not yet clean. For that, you got to count another 7 days, the mitzvah. For that, he needs a second immersion. As it says by mitzvah, first it says he should wash in water v'toher. That's the first immersion. And then he comes to the camp. And then he sits outside of the tent for 7 days, which means while the Metzora can come into the camp, but he still cannot be fully in his tent for 7 more days. And then on the 7th day, he shaves all of his hair, and then he washes. He basically goes to the mikvah a second time. That's by the Metzora. So we say, ahani tefillah kamaiso letare meletame mishkav v'moshav uklecheres behesed. So the first immersion helped him to clean him, that he will no longer metame this lying, the seat, the bed, or what he sits on, and also klecheres behesed will no longer be metame. Even though for achilas kochim, he would still need a second tefillah. So that is the meaning. That is the meaning. So he doesn't need to, as soon as he's done with his zoyve, he can start counting. And we don't have to wait. Another thing we learn from the pasuk, mizoyvoy v'sofar. In the pasuk, if you remember, the first mizoyvoy, it says, v'chiyitar hazov mizoyvoy v'sofar le'shivas yomim. Once he becomes clean, he's counting. So we're saying that even if he saw only twice, he still has to count 7 days. We'll see about it more in the Gemara. So we're saying also, mizoyve v'sofar, it says, zoyve v'sofar, limed al zov bal shtei riyas, shaton sviras shiva. This teaches us that even a zov who only saw twice, not 3 times, shaton sviras shiva is still going to have to count. That's why it says mizoyve v'sofar. Very interesting. The Gemara is going to ask. So here the word mizoyve is coming to include 2 sightings that he has to count Shiva. The other mizoyva came to tell us that if he has 2, he doesn't have to bring a korban. Some bring a korban. More is going to address that later on. But I just want to bring this out. Mizoyva v'sofar. How do we learn this? Rashi. Mizoyva v'sofar. Lahachi somach svira etzel zoyve. Why did the Torah put the word svira next to zoyve? Because the first mizoyve says once you stop, and then it's mizoyve v'sofar. The lamdach to teach you she'abish will mix a zov, even if he's only partially a zov, which means he only saw twice. Ton svira. It needs to do svira. Limed al zov b'al stei Riyas, this teaches us about Esav who saw twice, that you have to count the Shiva Nikim after he finishes seeing. The Gemara asks, well, why do we need a pasuk for that? Baloidinu. But isn't this a foratory? This is a kal v'chomer that a person that saw twice would have to count. Why? If he will be metame, mishkav v'moishav. That means that what he lies, as we proved before, that mishkav v'moishav, bal shteiriyas is metame. So he has this severe level of tumah. Lo yehei ton sviras shiva. Should he not be loaded with having to count 7 days? So Rashi, lo yehei ton sviras shiva bitmia. It's in a surprise. Surprise. Achar she'amarto shtayim chulu. After you said that 2, you have to is metame mishkav v'moishav v'achgasim halodinu. Metame mishkav v'moishav b'shteiriyas. If he could be metame the mishkav and the moishav just by seeing twice, l'kol chomer tumazov, for all the stringency of the tumazov, which means metame mishkav and moishav, that's the stringency of a zav, that he's metame the mishkav and moishav in such a way, even without touching them. Why would he be excluded from svira? Why do you need a pasuk mezoive v'sofar to tell you that even for 2 riyas you're going to have to count the shiva nikim? Why do we need that for? Seems to be if 2 riyas makes him tamei for all the stringency, then you have to count. Turn the page. The Gemara says, "Shemeres yoim keneged yoim techiach." I have a case, the Gemara says, where there is a tumah of mishkav and moishav, and yet you don't have to count sphere over there. You don't have to count 7 days. So just because you're metame mishkav and moishav by seeing twice the zav doesn't necessitate that you have to also count the 7 clean days. Because I can prove this, shemeres yoim keneged yoim techiach will prove to us. What is this shemeres yoim keneged yoim? So Rashi, haroya yoim echad oishnayim betoich achad osar yoim. A woman who sees dam, sees blood, either 1 day or 2 days, and that's in middle of the 11 days. That's called, the cycle goes 7 days, and after that's the days of the nidus, the day of the menstrual period. After the 7 days begins the 11 days. And those are called 11 days between one cycle and the other cycle. That's the time, if you see 1 or 2 days within the 11 days, which is between nidul and nidul. Let's look at Rashi. Shemeres yom keneged yoim, haroya yoim echad. The woman who sees either 1 day, or shnayim, or 2, she'll see 3 days, then she will become a zava. Then she will becomes a zava. But if she sees 1 day or 2 days, betoich achad osar yoim, inside 11 days. If she sees more than 2 days in the menstrual period, of course, that's normal. So then that would not make her into a zava or a zav. Or a zava gedola, not a zava. But if she sees just 1 day or 2 days, we don't have yet the stringency of 7. She doesn't have to count shiva nikim. So what happens then? She has to count 1 day. 1 day for the 1 day. For the day that she saw, she has to have 1 clean day, and then she goes to the Megilah. And she goes in that day. So teichiach, so this will prove to us that what? That you can be metame mishkav v'moishav, because over there we say shemetame mishkav v'moishav. This woman who saw then will be metame mishka v'moshav, ve'ena tu'una sfiras shiva, but she's still not going to have to count the sfiras shiva. So the fact that somebody is metame mishka v'moshav doesn't mean that you have to count 7 days. So why are you surprised that we're using a pasuk by the Zav, who saw it twice, that he has to do Sfira? You said, no. You asked, why do we need a pasuk? Tam Mishka v'Moshav should definitely, since 2 days, 1 or 2 days by Azav, Tam Mishka v'Moshav, then definitely you have to count Shiva Nikim. No, but here you see, Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom, she's Matama Mishka v'Moshav, ve'ena tu'una Sfira Shiva. Shabbatama Mishka v'Moshav, who says that neither is Matama Mishka v'Moshav? I mean, the Zava, Shmaita Basraisa, the Meseches Nida, Afayin Beis, or Beis Marabin Allah. But the Gemara learns it out that she's Matama Mishka v'Moshav. So Va'af Ato, so you too, Al Titama Al Zeh, don't be surprised about this. Sha'af Al Pisha Matama Mishka v'Moshav. That even though the Zav of Shtei Riyas, Riyach Nechet, in Matama Mishka v'Moshav, Lo yeh ton Sfira Shiva, he's not going to have to count 7. Talmud Loimer v'Mezovah v'Sofar. That's why we need the pasuk Mezovah v'Sofar to tell you that even one that mikzah Zovah v'Sofar, that even this is a mikzah Zovah, and he counts. Limed al Zov b'Shtei Riyas. This teaches us about a Zov who saw twice Sheton Sfira Shiva, that you have to count 7. So that explains. That explains why we needed a pasuk. Because we know that a zav, 1 or 2 re'iyas, requires is metam mishka v'moshav, doesn't mean that he need to count 7 days, as we see by the zava that when she saw 1 or 2 days, she's metam mishka v'moshav, and yet she does not have to count 7 days, and therefore we need a pasuk by Azav, that if he saw 1 or 2 days, he will have to count the Sfira, and he's Matamish Kamashal, of course. So we're going back to the question that I pointed you before. So Abaye says to Rapapa says to Abaye, Maishno Hai Mizoivoi. So from this pasuk Mizoivoi, we're including the Marbibei Zov Bashteiriyas. So over here, we're learning out that even a Zov who saw twice is still going to have to count. So how do you say Mi Zoivoi? Even if you're a partial Zov V'Sofar, you're still going to count. But in the second pasuk, Umaysh Nahai Mizoivoi, but in the pasuk, the original Mizoivoi we brought down, when it talks about the korban, so over there, Mizoiva, you say, no. Only 3 riyas will bring a korban. The Memayit Beizov, Ashte riyas. You say, Mizoiva, that only some zovs bring a korban. That's one who sees 3. But if you saw twice, then he doesn't bring a korban. Why is one Mizoiva including 2 riyas and one is excluding 2 riyas? Rashi. Maish Nahai Mizoiva. Why is it different, this Mizoiva? The first part, Pasuk Gimel, Mizoiva v'Sofar. From the beginning, Mizoiva v'Sofar, Darshas Lei. Over there, you expounded it to mean the Miktzah Zoiv. You say partial Zoiv, which means not 3, but 2. But what are you saying? Ulashminan, the Miktzah Zovim, you're coming to teach us that even though they're partial Zovim, they're not full Zovim, not 3, but still 2 in Sfira, Shiva, they become that they have to count 7 days. And in this idea, we hear that Zov Bal Shtei Riyas L'Sfira, that if you see twice, you are going to count. This Mizoiva that the Gemara brought down earlier, which is in Pasuk Tezvav, and the last one. And over there you don't say a partial Zov, in other words, you only saw, the Zov only saw twice, Lazui Zov Bashteris Lekorban, that he will bring a korban. Elamiktas Darsh Zov in Darshis Lay, but you do say partial Zovin, and you're saying that who is the partial Zovim? Some Zovim, that's the one that sees it 3 times. And you exclude, and you learn it on if you saw it 3 times, and you exclude somebody who saw it twice. So over here, the same is over here, the 2 means the partial one is going to count, and over there it means the partial one, only the 3-1 is going to bring a korban and not the partial one. Amalei, so he answered him, over here, salka daitach. So if you're going to say that Hailemutu also that Mizoiva is coming to tell you, only the 3-1 is going to count. Hailemutu, this one meaning the Pasuk Yud Gimel, the first one, we're talking about counting, is coming to exclude and tell us that you don't have to count if it's 2. So why does the Pasuk have to say anything? So let the Pasuk not say, and therefore there's no Pasuk that says that you have to count. So where do you know that? From where do you know that you would count? So you don't need a pasuk to tell you that you don't have to count, because so therefore we're saying the pasuk is telling you that you do have to count by 2 riyas, because there's no reason to exclude it. So we can't say the pasuk is coming to exclude it, like by the korban mizoivei, that you don't bring a korban in here. You're going to say you're not going to count if you have 2 riyas, because if you're not going to count that you have 2 riyas, you don't need a pasuk to tell you that, because we don't have a pasuk to tell you that you would have to count, because the pasuk doesn't say that you should count over there. So you're going to say, well, you're going to say no. We're going to learn it out from the halacha, because, as we said before, that since you're metame mishkav v'moishav, so you have to count, like the Gemara told before. But we already proved it, that over there she's metame mishkav v'moishav, and she doesn't have to count. So there would be no reason to say that the woman, that the guy, the Zov or Stadis has to count. So why would you need a pasuk mezovei to tell us that you have to count? So we have to say that so we wouldn't need a pasuk to tell us you don't have to count, because without a pasuk, why should you count? So we can't say that this pasuk is coming to tell us not to count. So we're saying the pasuk is telling you that even that you do have to count. If you're going to say you're going to learn it out by your light, by halacha, like you said before, what did you say? That if it can be mitame, could it be if it's mitame 2 times why would it not be ton shiva? So that wouldn't be a reason to know that you would have to count. Why? That's not why. Because you said we have a proof that she does betame mishkav v'moshav, and still there's no svira. So you wouldn't know svira. So we don't need a pasuk to exclude svira. So therefore we're saying that Mizav is coming to include svira. But how do we learn? We go back. Maybe it's not coming to add because we need it, because the Braisa brought down 2 drushes. One drasha brought out the other drasha brought out that you count by Shteiriyas. So how do you have the extra pasuk Mezoiva? We needed Mezoiva v'lemeniga that we said before that you don't need it to stop the nega, and you can start counting as soon as the zov is over, and then when he'll go to the mikveh for the first time, he won't be mitam mishkav meshma anymore. So he says in Cain there's two limudim. We learn out there's two extras, because in Cain lichtev kro v'chiyitar hazov v'lishtek. The Torah can just say when the zov will become clean. From this we know already that the zov is toyer. You don't have to wait for the nega. And then v'lishtek mizoyvoi lamali. So mizoyvoi lamali is coming to teach us the extra. Limud al zov bal shtei riyas sheton shira shiva tells us that he needs to count shiva. So look the Rashi. In Cain lichtev kra v'chiyitar hazov. So let the pasuk write just chiyitar hazov v'lei boy mizayva. We don't need mizayva. From this already we know that just from the zov he can start counting. How would we learn from that? Because it could have said just v'chiyitar. That's how you would know. That just from the zov is enough, and you don't have to wait for the nega to clear. So just v'chita, because there's an extra. The word hazov is extra. We don't need the mezaiva. My mezaiva. So what are we going to do? There's an extra word mezaiva. That's coming to tell us that mikzah zovin tovin svira, that even if it's a partial zovin, so only 2 riyas would still require svira. Limud al zov b'shtei riyas shaton svira shiva. This teaches us that even a zov who only saw twice would require shiva. We're going to go back and show you now in the pasuk again. So the way the pasuk works like this. So he says like this: from v'chiyitar, could have just said v'chiyitar, the sofer le'shivas yom. So from the extra word hazov, we learn that he only has to be clean from the zov. So if he has a nega, he doesn't have to wait till after he cleans from the nega. He can start counting for his sfira from the ziva as soon as the zov is over. Pasuk writes again mizoivei. This mizoiva is coming to teach us that you have to, that even if you only have twice mizoiva, sofer le'shivas yomim. How come we said over here mizoiva tells us that a korban is only bought by 3, but by 2 you don't bring a korban? And here mizoiva is coming to tell us that by 2 you also count. And the reason is because over here, if mizoiva is coming to tell us you don't count, you don't have to write mizoiva. Without this word, you're not going to count because only it's a full zov. And we don't have a reason, Mishkav Moshev, because we have a proof from Basteiris by Anida that she's Yitzvai by Zova, that she's Metame Mishkav Moshev. So therefore, we need all the pasuk, and this is the way the drashas go. All right, let's see. What time is it? We have some more time over here. Maybe we'll start the next Mishnah. So by a mitzvah, sometimes we lock up the mitzvah because we're not sure if it's a mitzvah or not. So it says the kohen goes and locks him up for 7 days. Sometimes the kohen makes a decision. This guy is tummy, right? So whether the mitzvah is locked up until we find out, or he's been decided, the tumah that he would that it produces would, for him, it doesn't make a difference. So this is what the Mishnah says. Ein bei mitzoyda muzgar le mitzoyda muchlat. It makes no difference if the mitzoyda was locked up till we find out, or a mitzoyda muchlat who was defined that he's tomei elo priya uprima. Priya means that he lets his hair grow. Uprima, that's rendering the garments, like kriya. That's priya uprima. Priya prima Rashi teaches of the god of Yiyu Frumim. His garments should be rendered. The Roshi Yiparu, and his head should be grow wild, which means can't cut his hair. So if he is a mukhlat, he's decided, then he has to render his garment and he has to let his hair grow. But if he's only a musgar, he's only locked up, then he does not have to render his garment, and he doesn't have to let his hair grow. Further, the Mishnah says, "Ein bein toir mitach hezger letoir mitach hechlet." Makes no difference in the tare that takes place when we're just locked up, when you become toir, to letoir mitach hechlet, to when you become toir, when you were decided tameh. When you were decidedly tameh, or you were just locked away, we're not sure. Elo taglachas v'tziporim. Only the shaving of the hair and the birds, the karbonis. After you were mukhlat, you have to shave the hair and you bring birds for a carbon. But if you were just locked up, to ever find out there's no birds and there's no tziporim over there. Okay, so let's leave it over here. This belongs over here. All right, let's leave it over here. We give over a little bit the portion of Akiv today. Akiv means a heel. That means the heel. Let me just put this down over here. Akiv means the heel. So the Rashi brings down, the pasuk basically says that when you keep mitzvahs, that people sometimes step with it on the heel. They don't think it's important. You know, some mitzvahs we take seriously, or we consider them to be important. Everybody knows Yom Kippur. Everybody knows Shabbos. These are important mitzvahs. But what about some light mitzvahs that you don't pay attention to, saying something bad to somebody, speaking lashon hara, maybe hurting somebody's feelings, or other mitzvahs? The pasuk says, Rashi says, there are certain mitzvahs that a person tramples under his feet. So the pasuk is saying that even the mitzvahs that one tramples under his feet, tishmon, you have to listen and you have to do the mitzvahs, fully do the mitzvahs. The Medrash brings down that David HaMelech said, you know what, I'm afraid. Avoin akeva yisubeni. The sins of the heels surround me. Medrash says that David HaMelech was afraid. Maybe he's not so careful. Loma iro b'meiro avoin akeva yisubeni. He says in Tehillim, why should I worry in the days when things are difficult, when I'm surrounded by the sin of the heel? So it's a little bit hard to understand. So David HaMelech did not take these sins of the heel like those easy sins. He didn't take them seriously. I mean, it seems a little bit far-fetched. Also, actually, David HaMelech also says in Tehillim, in another pasuk, he brings down that he says there that he is careful. He also uses lashon of Akiv, that he does do. In that same medrash, he brings down a further pasuk which he says that he kept the mitzvahs of the heel. So what's going on here? So Rebbe brings down an interesting idea. We're not talking about. There's two approaches. Some people have an approach that things have to be orderly, which means the mitzvahs, important mitzvahs have to be done diligently. The important mitzvahs have to be done with excitement. But still, there needs to be an order. There needs to be what comes first, what comes second. Say, for example, you tell a person, you have to l'reacha kamocha. Love thy fellow as yourself. Essentially, you have to love somebody, even if you never met him, another Jewish person. And we know that we care about people in Eretz Yisrael, we care about people all over the world. We have a special place. We have Ahavas Yisrael. But sometimes people will say, well, this is not real. I mean, I don't even love the people that I know. Even somebody who's done me a favor, somebody who's been good to me, and still I don't have Ahavas Yisrael. How could you expect for me to have Ahavas Yisrael to somebody I don't know? I mean, the same thing is in Torah learning. Sometimes we say that the Rebbe asked that people study every day the portion of the Chumash of the day, like in Parshas Eikev, you do Shlishi on Tuesday, and so on. Also the portion of the Tehillim. Every day of the month, you do the portion of the Tehillim. And every day, you also do the portion of the Tanya. But say, how could you expect me to learn that? I don't even learn the basics, I'm not gonna. So there is an approach. The Rebbe says that sometimes the answer will be, well, things have to be in an orderly way. You're not gonna say, the guy doesn't wear a shirt and he's gonna put on a tie. It doesn't make any sense to wear a tie if you don't wear a shirt on. So when am I gonna go worry about, mitzvahs when I'm not doing the basics? But the Rebbe quotes from the Pirkei Avos. It says, "Havei zohir, the mitzvah kala kebachamura." You got to be careful with a light mitzvah, like with a serious mitzvah. Why? Because mitzvahs essentially are connecting pieces that connect the human beings with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Hashem. Because how could we connect? Hashem is infinite and we're finite. When we do a mitzvah, the Eibishter gave us opportunities to connect to him. So basically, mitzvahs are connectors, connecting pieces. There is 620, 613 plus 7 mitzvah rabbanon. There's Tov Reish Chof Amudi Oyer. There's 620 pillars of light which connect, and the Jewish people are connected just like pillars connect the roof and the floor. These mitzvahs connect us with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if you look at it from the perspective that it's a connecting piece, it doesn't make a difference what the mitzvah is. It's a connection. Important mitzvah, not important. I'm gaining a connection. An approach of a yid has to be first acceptance to serve Hashem, not based on the rationale and saying, well, this mitzvah pays for me, this mitzvah is important, this is not important. Actually, Hashem responds in the same way you treat him. It's midah keneged midah. If you serve Hashem and you say, look, I'm going to get involved, this is an important mitzvah, not such an important mitzvah, then Hashem may say to you too, hey, you know what? We're living now in very difficult times where we don't see miracle, we see nature. God says to you also, listen, if you treat me what is important, not important, maybe treated by Hashem like that as well. The whole approach of a yid needs to be Nasev and Nishma. I'll do, and then I'll listen. We serve Hashem blindly, just following Hashem blindly. And any mitzvah, we do it with the same amount of excitement, enthusiasm, connecting to Hashem. This is the way the Rebbe explained. This doesn't mean that David HaMelech didn't do the light mitzvahs. What David HaMelech was worried about, maybe he didn't do the light mitzvahs with that same sense of urgency, with the same sense of commitment. He did it, but maybe he was lacking in fully doing it the way he should in the highest level. That is something that bothered him, that he was worried about. But he did all the mitzvah, even the light mitzvahs. So we have the responsibility of doing all the mitzvahs. We also have the special privilege to finish up the mitzvahs, because all the mitzvahs of all the generations that are before us, we know once you start a mitzvah, we tell you to finish it, but it's called who gets the credit for a mitzvah? The one who finishes it. So we are going to finish, and we're going to bring Mashiach, and all the work from all the generations, we're going to get the credit for it. Rashi brings down that while Yosef is the one that bothered to take up the bones, Moshe brought the bones of Yosef out of Egypt, but then later on, Yeshua says, who buried him? The Bnei Yisrael, because they finished it, even though the whole trouble is that went through was Moshe Rabbeinu. Same thing us, Mitzvah Shem, when we'll finish up with the Golus, we will get the credit and we'll bring Mashiach down. Actually, the Mariv is a little earlier already, so we'll still keep it next week at this time. We'll see what happens as we go on. Have a good evening. See you next week in Mitzvah Shem. Thank you for joining.
All right. Thank you, Rabbi.